I wanna touch the sky, gravity defy. My eyes are bone dry, no woman, no cry. Too many lost lives, too many white lies, too many God wise. Make the black fist rise. This epidemic is a sickness. Ayo, ayo, can I get a witness? The smoke is heavy, we caught in the thickness. My black skin makes me suspicious. New masters, new slaves, old raptures, same graves. Jesus walks, they tell me Jesus saves. But if you make it through the night, that's a quiet day. Let me tell you what's the matter. They say our lives matter, but they act like we don't matter, so we keep on getting madder. Let me tell you what's the matter. They say our lives matter, but they act like we don't matter, so we keep on getting madder. Every time I turn around, another body on the ground. Say her name, let it resound. True colors, black and brown. They lock us up, they lock us down. Yes, I was lost.
My name is Alessandra Taylor, or Alyssa. I'm 20. I live in Boston, Massachusetts, currently in the downtown area. And right now I'm a full-time student at Emerson College, where I major in directing and playwriting, and I minor in creative writing with an emphasis in fiction and gender and sexuality studies. After figuring out the terms that I was transgender or transsexual, I came out to my sister and a few other friends, and like that was it. And I really didn't know how to like go about transitioning, and so I talked to my doctor, and like I had to talk to a bunch of therapists, but then like we needed my mom's consent so I could start hormones, and that didn't go well. My mom and I actually got into a lot of arguments and like fights over me being trans, so much so that even though my social transition was pretty much done by the time I was 18, I had not really like medically transitioned. People were like, would call me she, her, and hers, and like say like Alyssa, like my friends would call me that. But for the most part, you know, I think people still thought that I was identifying and presenting as male. Right before I turned 19, though, I started presenting full-time outside of my house as female, and I started talking to therapists and doctors to get on hormones, because by that point I was old enough that I could start without my mother's permission. And on my 19th birthday, I like officially was like, okay, getting rid of all my boy stuff. I'm just gonna like go for it and be the woman that I am. And it didn't really go so well, to say the least. I got kicked out of my house. I ended up stopped talking to my mom for a really long time, for about 6 months. It was rough. A lot of my family stopped talking to me, but some of them still did. Like my younger cousins understood, and maybe that's just because they had been around me for so long that they kind of just like knew me. And my older sisters supported me, but some of my aunts and stuff. But for the most part, like my family still like even now tries to call me by my birth name. And my mom is like sort of coming around. Like she uses my childhood nickname, which I told her was okay to use. Tries not to call me her son. Instead she'll say like my child or my baby or something like that. And she said she stopped correcting people when they call me her daughter on the streets, but she doesn't actually call me her daughter. And I don't talk to any of my brothers or my father. I mean, like I was barely talking to my father anyway, but like we've officially stopped talking. And my oldest brother just stopped talking to me completely. And it sucks, but what are you gonna do? And you know, I mean, while it like sucks that I don't have a lot of like support, especially my immediate family, I mean, I still do have a lot of family support, and I've created family like outside of my relatives. So yeah.
I'm Faris Sitar. I'm 21 years old and I'm from the Maldives, but right now I live in the South End in Boston. I am FTM, so a transgender male, and I started transitioning. Well, I started dressing as male in public probably last year, and only started hormones about 4 months ago now. And I'm still in the early processes of transitioning, but I've definitely seen a big change as far as passing in public. Now I pretty much pass 100% of the time, and so that's been interesting and different, and the way people have treated me has... I've seen big changes in that. So, my family, because I'm Maldivian, it's a small little country in Asia, and it's a 100% Muslim country as well. So when I first came out to them, it was like all hell broke loose, you know. My sisters were really supportive, but my mom and my dad didn't want to have anything to do with it. I was supposed to go home, but ended up not going home because they were just ashamed of what the rest of my family was going to think of me dressing like this. And slowly, my mom has been telling other people, and they're saying, you know, we love Fari no matter what. And it's still a struggle for my parents, but it's amazing to see how far they've come. And, you know, they realize that they love their kid for who I am. Though they're not ready for the pronouns yet, but I'm excited with how things are going.
Hi, I'm Carter. I live in Boston, Massachusetts. I am an activist. I work at the Boston Alliance of Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Youth, or BAGLY for short. My title is Queer Activist College Organizer. So I organize and facilitate activist courses and teach them to LGBTQ youth, ages 22 and under. I also represent BAGLY on event planning committees that are hosted by some of our community partners. I feel like there were varying reactions to my transition from my family. I feel like closer family definitely had a harder time with it. My mom cried when I came out to her, and she was like, I'm losing my daughter. And my stepfather was like, you know, I'm the only man in this house, and I know that it's been difficult for my oldest sister. I feel like family that I am less close to kind of had an easier time juggling with it, in terms of they asked a lot of questions. They were like, well, why do you want to transition, and what changes would you make, and things like that. And then more distant family, they heard from other people, so I'm not really sure what their reaction was, but I also don't care. I do feel like now me and my family have mostly come to terms with me being trans, more so on a positive note, especially with my mom, which makes me really happy because we get to be close again.
Hi, I'm V. I live in Boston, 29 years old, and I work in property management. I remember when I first explained to my little sister about transgender people. She knew about people who would transition, and I told her that I already knew, but I said there's people out there that never change their appearance. And I remember her saying, so for all intents and purposes, you just wouldn't know. And I said, right, but there's lots of people out there that do feel this way, where you would know by looking at them externally. Sometime later, I told her that, you know, I don't feel like a girl. She's very feminine, so, you know, and we grew up together. She saw that, she understood that. She's known me all my life, but she wouldn't quite understand this, and she would, but... You know, because I used to date cis men, and even with trans, who you date came into play. A lot of people don't understand that this is your identity. It's not the same as whomever you're dating, which then also changed. And it was after I told her about my first relationship that she started to understand. It was after a phone call when I was with my first girlfriend. She was asking me, how's that going for you? This is a trans female. When I started explaining certain things, it clicked. And sometime after that, we were on the phone, and she said, you know, I've been telling people that I have a sister. Do I have a brother? You know, and I was like, I don't know, thinking, is she showing pictures? What if it doesn't make sense? And I was like, well, kind of stuttering, you can tell them slowly, gradually. And she goes, because I love you, it doesn't matter. I just want to know. I told her, you do. You have a brother. And from then on, it's been very different when we talk. We've been closer. My advice on men is heated more, although it has always been the same. You should always listen to me. But she took it well, and she's trying her best to understand. There's a lot of questions she'll have about, do you think you're going to change your appearance? There's a lot of, a lot of focus on how you look and what are you going to do? Are you going to start taking, is this why you're hitting the gym? Just, bullshit like that. But she gets it, and it's a good thing.
My name is LaSaya Wade. I'm originally raised in Nashville. I live in Baltimore, Maryland now. Born in Chicago. I am a licensed nail tech. Going for my master cosmetology. I do hair and nails. Beauty is my thing. My background is kind of hard on certain things. My father, when I somewhat came out and told him I was kind of gay, he took that hard. But I never ever felt gay. So when I was talking to my mother and told her I'm thinking about transitioning into a female, kind of went closed-minded for a minute because she didn't understand. So when she went closed-minded, she told my father, and that really took the cake. My father is very religious, and he's the type of person that he wants it his way and what the Bible say and nothing else. When we had an argument or a fight in other hands, we stayed in the house for 3 years straight, like ghosts to each other. We didn't say nothing to each other. We walked beside each other, and it was nothing. It was like a gust of wind for both of us. But after the 3rd year, my uncle Tim, he talked to my father, told him that they was raised around a lot of gay people, that, or whatever I wanted to be. So we're talking about, how older people talk. He told him that he should love me anyway, no matter what, because I'm his child. And my family's close-knit, so when he told him that, my father kind of took that to heart. And he came to me, started crying. After all the big to-do and all the arguing, the fighting, I had to establish myself with my parents. I had to let them know that I'm going to be okay, that I'm going to be respected regardless. Because that's what they was worried. Am I going to be respected for who I am, or I'm going to be talked about? After they realized that I'm the type of person that at the end of the day, you're going to either respect me or you're going to be out of my space. So they took my transitioning well after that. After they knew that I'm going to be okay.
Hello, my name's London. I'm 18. I'm from Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts. And I recently graduated from Empire Beauty School back in April. And going for my license still, and in training becoming a professional hairstylist and makeup artist. See, this is the funny part. My family always kind of knew that I was in the LGBT spectrum, but they don't want to assume it, even though there are times when I said I'm not. But when I came out to my mother that I was bi in freshman year, no, she was very accepting. My whole family was accepting. And then 2 weeks later, they threw a national, they threw a quote unquote national coming out surprise birthday party. Not birthday party, a surprise party for me. No, and it was just amazing because it just made me realize that I'm lucky to have a supportive family and stuff. Unlike others that maybe might have a hard time accepting their child for who they are or something. But I don't know, I just felt lucky and thankful for them. But yeah.
Hey, my name is Mike Hatcher McLaren, and I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. And so right now I am a student at the University of Maryland, College Park, and I primarily do affirmation work surrounding LGBT communities of color, especially trans communities of color. And basically, I started doing that when I was in my freshman year of college. However, I started my transition when I was in 11th grade, but I only started socially transitioning with my friends. And that didn't particularly go as well as I wanted it to, because a lot of people in my high school did not understand what transgender was. And so when I told them about that I was wanting to transition after doing a lot of research and figuring out what it meant to be transgender, they didn't quite stick with it. So then I receded back into the closet until I got to college and met another trans person, my first trans person, and decided to go along with socially transitioning down the line. Since then, I've just been trying to find different ways to affirm myself and affirm other trans people, because I know how difficult that process was in the beginning, and trying to feel like the gender that I know I am, and having other people respect that and give me that type of energy and that type of positive affirmation. I think the first person who I came out to was my mother, and that was my sophomore year of, actually the ending of my sophomore year for college. And that was difficult because I purposely set myself up to have to tell her, or have to have that conversation by telling her on the way back home. And she just, at first she had no real understanding of it, nor did she have much acceptance for it. She had thought that, like, I had been molested or something. She believed that it was it was because of my previous lesbian experience that I was now wanting to be a man, and that I was just really masculine. I wasn't a dude, and a whole bunch of things that just was counterproductive to the conversation. And so for that kind of went throughout for a really long time, and we were not really on good ground. I stopped talking to her, stopped telling her stuff, and she had at one point even confronted me about it, saying like I don't tell her anything anymore. And we had to have that conversation of why I don't tell her anything anymore. I think since then, it's gotten a little bit better. It's gotten a lot better. And she's trying to be as supportive as she can. She's learning more and more as she goes along. But it is a struggle because, I mean, obviously she still messes up with my gender pronouns. She still messes up with my name sometimes. But it at least it's going somewhere. Whereas my sister, you can just forget it. I told her once, and she just thought I was making it up. And then and I told her, no, I'm not making it up. Like, this is real. And she's just like, okay. And we just don't talk about it anymore. And our relationship has kind of fell apart, but it's definitely broken down a lot from what it used to be, because we don't hang out anymore. We don't really have substantial conversations, because most of she's always talking about I'm her sister, and I'm like, I'm not your sister, like that has changed, and she's not really getting it. So we kind of like have completely separate spheres in which we operate. But then I told my grandma, and she was really cool about it. I think my dad's side of the family is much cooler about it than my mom's side of the family is. I kind of got disowned for a little bit by my mom's youngest brother, when he even found out that I like girls. So like, he wouldn't talk to me. He would always give me a side eye when he saw me. But now he's coming around a little bit more. But like, that process was pretty broken up, because at some points it seemed like I had support when I was actually and I had lesbian experience, but then when I started transition, my family was slowly but surely like falling from grace and falling apart. And I didn't have as much support, probably because a lot of people don't know what transgender is, and like, they're so accustomed to the whole black and white, male or female thing, and the fact that sexuality and gender aren't the same thing, and they're not, sex and gender aren't synonymous, but they just always think that. So that was really hard time at first. I guess it's slowly getting better.
I started my transition when, I guess you could say when I was 13, 14. That's when I like really knew that I was trans. And at that point I had watched a lot of documentaries on BBC, and Isis King was on America's Next Top Model, and that was really how like I knew that I was trans, because for the first time I had seen like a black trans woman who was saying exactly how I felt inside. And up until that point I had identified as gay, but like I knew that like I wanted to be a girl, and not like a drag queen, like I wanted to be a girl all the time. And I like used to wear a ton of lip gloss, and I would walk around with like tennis ball, tissue paper boobs. You know, would like have a wig that I would just like sometimes wear in school, and that was when I was in 8th grade.
I first started, I guess, questioning my gender or feeling like I was different when I was about 10 or 11, but I didn't really know what to make of feeling like I was a boy. And the only examples I saw of trans people were on like Jerry Springer, and you know, they were portrayed as like freaks and there was something wrong with them, and they like hid their past from people that they were seeing. And I also did not know that female body people could transition to male. So I just kind of, I repressed my feelings. I didn't know what to make of them. I thought I was crazy. So I just focused more on my sexual orientation. And then when I was about 19, I met the first trans guy I ever met. And he was like telling me he was trans or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, you could do that? Because I didn't know. And so I was like listening to him talk about being trans, and I realized like in that moment, in that interaction, that I was trans.
So, like when I started transitioning, well, back in 7th grade, yeah, or when I was in 7th grade, I remember like being interested in makeup and stuff because my mom always had it right in front of me and stuff, and she would always like play with these different ideas and stuff, like all these colors that I saw. And then I decided I wanted to do makeup because it seemed very fun, and I thought I can use my face as like somewhat of a coloring book and stuff. But I feel like once I got to high school, that's when I started finding myself more. Finding myself more into becoming the person who I am today. Because it started off with makeup, and then by freshman year, experimenting with like men's and women's clothing, like cross-dressing. And then once I hit like junior year till now, that's when I found out who I am, like the person who I am today and stuff. But yeah.
I started transitioning at the age of 20 after high school while I was going to college. I knew because I felt weird. I didn't know who I was. I had more swag, more swing in my hip than most people. And I was wondering why. I felt different than most people. I really didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. But then one day, I actually met a woman. I call her my mother. And I was talking to her why I felt different, why I'm comfortable in my own skin. And then she told me that you may be transgender, or maybe a woman in a man's body. When she told me that, I didn't know what she was talking about. I didn't know much about the world. So when I was looking more into it, and I finally realized who I felt comfortable as when I first put on my first bra or first skinny jeans, or actually wore my hair down, put a little makeup on, and thought I was everything. I felt more comfortable in my skin.
Humanity's legacy are not what the law taught, it's the malice of forethought and the conscience the store-bought manifestation of negative core thoughts manufactured by the stalwarts of Judas's disciples. For those that believe in human kindness, I pity the light that will be extinguished as their day turns to night. For those that battle for ideals, I pity the fight. On the descendo, pity the flight, pity the plight.
Dealing with dysphoria for me isn't as hard as it used to be. When I was younger, like between the ages of 13 and 19, and really figuring out who I was and trying to come out and not being able to be myself, it was a lot harder. I hated myself. I felt like that, I didn't like my body. I was disgusted with it. But since I started hormones, it's easier. It's a lot easier to deal with myself because I look in the mirror, and even when I'm having a bad day, thinking oh, I'm not pretty, I still think that I'm a woman, and I look in the mirror for the most part, and I'm I am so happy that the way I viewed myself on the inside is finally my outside. Definitely the fact that I have hips now and breasts, and I can weave, and my face is more rounded and has everything's more, I guess, of classically feminine now. That's made it easier. I do still have days where I look in the mirror though, and it's real bad, and I think that oh my god, I'm a boy. How can everybody not tell that I'm a boy? But those days are significantly less. In terms of coping mechanisms for how I feel when I am really dysphoric, I think one, talking to my other trans friends who are we can reassure each other that we've come a long way, or talking to my boyfriend who always makes me feel beautiful, and music. I think music helps everybody with a lot of things, but definitely for me, dealing with my dysphoria, listening to Nicki Minaj, or that song "Man I Feel Like a Woman," which I think is by Faith Hill, but I'm not really sure who it's by. I don't know. It's just on my iPod. It is by Shania Twain. That's right. Yeah. I love that song. That song, I've been singing that song since I was 3 years old. So, that song makes me feel better. But I mean, just things like that, or reading, so I can just escape my reality, and I'm not thinking about myself. And then when I get back to reality, I'm not really thinking about myself, and then that helps me feel better. I don't know. In terms of society, people don't really clock me anymore, and so for the most part, if somebody's talking to me on the street, they don't know me. It's most of the time that they're hitting on me, and so I guess that makes me feel good.
So before I started transitioning, I didn't think I didn't have too much dysphoria, but and I thought once I started T, all of that would definitely be gone. But it seems like now that I've started T, suddenly I have more body dysphoria, and I just you want to go into surgeries and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy how I feel now that because I pass, I need to fit into this certain stereotype of what is an attractive male. That way I will really be perceived as male by by the rest of society, And so now where I come from, in Asia, all the guys are shorter, and so when I was there, I just felt like I fit in more. I felt more like a man. But here, guys tend to be taller and all those things, so I just feel more feminine just because I have a smaller frame than what a lot of cis guys would have here in the States. And so that's one of my biggest stresses, is constantly comparing myself to cis guys and never feeling like I really measure up. And especially now that I'm on testosterone, I feel why can't I? My voice is changing, slowly getting hairier, things are changing bit by bit, but I still I don't feel like I'm ever gonna reach that level of what a man is to the rest of the world.
So, dysphoria sucks. I feel I mostly have dysphoria about the upper part of my body, so my chest. And I feel I have a lot of anxiety around whether or not people can see my chest. And I know that, for the most part, I pass because I have facial hair, my voice is, a little bit deeper. So, I think that, I may not have to worry worry about it as much as I actually do, but there's always that anxiety there. Like, am I binding well enough? Like, do I have uniboob? Has my chest shifted while I was walking? And oftentimes I can see people like looking at my face and then looking down at my chest and looking back up, and like it's so awkward. And I also feel in terms of like how society makes me feel about my body. I think that there are more cis people in the world than there are trans people, and I feel like sometimes the cis people I know, my friends, the people I work with, like they forget that because I'm wearing a chest binder that limits some of the things I can do, and they're all like, let's go to the beach or let's walk for 30 minutes, and I'm like, no, because I will pass out and die. And so I think that like there are things that people want to do and like places people want to go, and like they don't always think about like the limitations that trans people might have, and I feel like that feeds into like me feeling negatively about myself. So it's like I already have dysphoria and discomfort with my body, and that makes me feel bad about myself. And then on top of that, like people want to do things and go places, and like I want to go to those places and do those things too, but like I can't, not in the same way that they can. And so that definitely like makes me feel bad about myself.
Oh my God, the hair, the beard, the chest hair, the hair on the legs. It's the worst feeling. Society has a woman is statuesque, a woman is short. She's no taller than 5'7". She's shaped a certain type of way. She's supposed to look a certain type of way. She's supposed to have long hair. She's supposed to always wear makeup. She's supposed to look like a goddess. In other words, it's hard to the simple fact that because I don't want him to clock my tea, or I don't want her to clock my tea, because if they clock my tea, next thing you know it, they're going to talk about me. They're going to let everybody know that I'm trans, or I'm a man dressed up in a women's clothing, or I'm a freak. You have to wake up early in the morning, 3 to 4 hours before you leave to go to work, to put on your makeup, to shave, to make sure you tuck, to make sure your bulge is not showing so everybody can see that you're trans or a man dressed up in women's clothing. I shaved every day, had them razor cuts before I left the house to make sure every piece of hair was gone. I had to do laser surgery so the hair won't grow back. And it's hard leaving the house knowing that you don't look woman enough or man enough for transgender men, or it doesn't matter due to the fact that if you are who you say you are, you shouldn't be judged.
So my gender dysphoria, it's slowly been improving over time, but I think my day-to-day struggle is just like clothes in general. Because I don't have top surgery and I don't have bottom surgery, I always am thinking about how my body is going to be presented in these clothes. And even though I don't bind anymore, just because it was giving me more complications than it was helping my dysphoria, I stopped binding. So now I'm super, super conscious. I layer up a lot. Still, I try my best to layer up. Even though I preferably don't want to, I do, and I try to wear really baggy clothing. But the thing is, I don't like when my clothes are too big, so it's like a conflict, and it takes me a really long time to get dressed because I'm always trying to be aware of how, like, what's going to be seen, like what part of me is going to be seen, and like if I'm going to be able to walk into a bathroom and be okay without being approached, or if I'm going to be in any type of space that may be more masculine presenting, and wondering how people are going to be perceiving me. Not because I particularly care about what people are thinking about me, but about the consequences that will come with the thoughts and like what actions people will take against me. And finding out that I'm trans, or finding out that I have this body type that doesn't conform to that of a cisgender.
In my day-to-day life, I don't really pass as male, so the dysphoria hits me often and randomly sometimes. Like, I'll catch a glimpse of myself and then, everything might have been fine when I left the house, and then something like I took off my hat at my job, and then I'll like, oh crap, freeze up, and that'll happen. Mornings for me are very hard. It's hard to, luckily, I've mentioned the new wardrobe that's happening now, so hopefully that'll make things easier. But putting together outfits, presenting as female, it's not like I feel like I can't do it or I don't do it well. It's just stressful. One thing I do want to look into is binders, and that's something I'm going to talk to Anton about. I've attempted to bind before with sports bras. It was unbearable. I suffered for a couple hours. I had a uniboob going on, and I decided, fuck it, I'm going to rock them because it's not fooling anybody. I look ridiculous and I feel uncomfortable, so I was like, I'm fine. Going along with the fact that I'm not transitioning, though, there are times where it's just unacceptable to be perceived as really soft, very feminine. That becomes, I might do a good job at it, I can do it well, but it's uncomfortable for me to look like that, to be out in public like that. The way people approach me when I look like that. Wearing my hair back or in braids and cornrows, it's a lot easier. People tend to leave me alone more. If I say I don't date men, they're like, oh, okay, kind of take one look at you and keep it moving. Instead of long flowing hair and a dread, that's not okay. It hasn't been for a while, but now it's, I've been saying I'm not doing this. So that's kind of a recent thing, but it's important. It's becoming less and less okay to look a certain way. I don't know if that's the beginning of a road to something else, but I've noticed it.
So I started hormones in September of 2011, so I've been on hormones for about 3 years. So I was seeing my therapist, and I did the minimum of 3 months, but I decided I wanted to wait longer. And so basically after the 3-month mark, he was kind of like, whenever you're ready to start. So I waited until I was in therapy for about a year, and then I started hormones. I feel like the best thing about hormones for me is the facial hair, the deepening of the voice, and the hair that grows in other places, like a little patch here and hair I have on my arms. And I'm especially fond of my little whatever you call this. I don't know what it is, but I'm fond of that. In terms of negative side effects, I don't know whether this is negative or not, but I've definitely noticed that I am more irritated and aggravated a lot quicker than before I started hormones. And sometimes I think that's a bad thing because I feel like sometimes I get mad or irritated at something that I probably shouldn't get mad or irritated at. But I also feel like sometimes it can be a good thing because I feel like I speak up more about things when I'm upset than I used to.
So I'm currently 4 months on hormones, and I went into this thinking it was going to be a really, really hard process because I'm an international student. I didn't know what was going to go on. I thought I have to wait until I'm 30 to even get accepted. But I went to Sydney Morum, and I had one doctor's physical checkup, and then I went to go see the gender therapist twice, and then went in front of the board, and I got the acceptance letter. And it was unbelievable how easy the process is. I think a lot of us live in fear of it's going to be really difficult, or there's going to be a whole bunch of judgment, or we have to act a certain way, but they're trying to make it as easy for us to be happy. They just want to. I don't know how I feel about it having to go in front of a board, but that's a whole nother thing. The main differences for me right now is that my voice has dropped. I'm starting to get a little bit hairier. I feel like my face has changed the tiniest bit, and my moods. Probably, if you ask my friends, I've gotten a little moodier, But I think also there's a general calm that I have now that didn't exist before because I was start crying or something like that because I was feeling sad about my body and stuff. There haven't really been any negative effects for me, I did go into hormones thinking it was going to be my savior, it was going to fix all of everything, and I realized that that's not what it does. It made me feel good about my outward appearance and things, but I still am working on everything else.
Well, I started right after my 19th birthday, a week after. And for me, I had a relatively easy process getting on hormones. I know that for a lot of people, they need to be for a lot of times required that they've been in therapy for at least 2 years. I had been in therapy for over 2 years for things not really pertaining to my gender identity, but that would come up a lot because it was something that I was like dealing with, and I knew that I was trans by the time I was 13. As I came out around 14, and I just like wasn't able to transition due to like family issues and my mom. And like when I was 18, I could have like gone to the doctors and started hormones, but I, one, financially wasn't in a place where I thought it was possible, and even though I knew I wanted to transition, I wasn't ready yet, and there's like nothing else to say, but I wasn't ready yet. So, or when I was 18 going on 19, I started therapy. I did about a month and a half. I had to get my levels checked, and like then I had to wait to see if both my doctor and my therapist, psychiatrist thought it was a good idea, and it was. I got my prescription on the 13th, and like I said, I started them I think on the 14th of March. And as far as their effects, I had low testosterone levels. I've heard of like a lot of people like break down. I didn't start having like breakdowns until a year later. Like for the past like year, maybe more, I like cry a lot more. So I mean, I do still like get heated real quickly, but they also like I've learned how to like deal with that. But like now it's all about crying, and I mean like I don't cry, or at least I used to not like cry like that. But I mean, I'll just feel sad for no reason, and then I'll just bawl. And like, but I mean, I don't know, I guess that's also been kind of helpful. I feel like I've had a lot of emotional breakthroughs because I've just been crying like, oh my god, like I feel a certain type of way, and this is why, and I don't think I would have ever said this if I hadn't felt like this. And I mean, waterworks for like a good half an hour. And I'm not a cute crier, I'm an ugly crier. Like, so that's been, I mean, that is what it is.
I started testosterone on July 18th. I went to Chase Brexton, which is in downtown Baltimore, but I also had to get an evaluation from my nurse practitioner and to see if she thought I was qualified, like if I had any health issues, or I had to get blood work done to make sure that there was no history of like breast cancer or anything like that. Anything that would basically cause a complication in me taking testosterone. And that process it was not as long for me because I had to literally I had to use the system. I had to play it, like trick it up. I was supposed to have gone to therapy for like a year or something like that. I went for 12 weeks. So I got around it, but that's not how you're supposed to do it. Especially not in Maryland. You're usually supposed to go for like a year or so, and before you can actually get surgery. But thankfully, my nurse practitioner was nice, and so was my therapist, who didn't really know a lot about the process. So I was able to just be like, yeah, I just need a letter. And she's like, oh, okay, sure. And we went through all our therapy sessions talking about it. She just decided to write the letter towards the end. But I think if she probably would have had a little bit more experience talking about trans people, I probably would have had to been there longer. But thankfully I didn't.
Thank you all for coming here. Some of you might know that this is the second time I've done this. So last year I also had something like this. And my parents came, Antoine and I think Gibson were here. But anyway, so 2 years ago, I tried to take my own life, and I was unconscious for 2 years.
You're beautiful, you're kind, you're gracious, you're an astronaut, a clever thought, galactic.
I started to get kind of anxious when this time came around last year, and I had a conversation with someone, and they were like, what are you going to do to celebrate that you've been alive for another year? So I started that as a tradition. And so that's why I'm having this right now, because it's been 2 years since my last suicide attempt. And I don't know, I feel really good. Like, I'm in a really good place in life. And I know some of you know, but some of you don't know. So I am calling on Tuesday to schedule my top surgery. I'll probably have surgery. Yeah! I'm probably going to have surgery sometime in July. Woo! So super quick. Like, in a month or two. Like,
that's okay. I'm already buying a lot of tank tops. So if
I'm super excited. I am taking tank tops as gifts. Just saying. And I'm really excited because I'm finally gonna be able to like do stuff that I haven't been able to do and like not get mad at people when they're like, let's go to the beach. And be like,
Yeah,
I can go to the beach, I'm like really happy and really excited about that. Hopefully, many of you will come to the hospital like by the time I wake up. But I'll be bedridden, so definitely like come see me. Well, like for a week at least. Please come by, bring me things. But when I call on Tuesday, I will let everybody know what the date is. Like I said, sometime in July. And I don't want to like drag this on much further because then I'm gonna get all emotional.
Your private parts are different now, aren't they?
I think that the question of whether or not people have surgery or like what genitalia they have, it's so goddamn disrespectful. And it's like, not only does mainstream media ask you, but like people in society, like I've come out to so many people, and that's always like the first question, especially when you're talking to guys. Like they'd be like, so do you have the same thing down there as me or not? And it's like, can we not? Like, I don't understand why it's, I mean, I guess to some degree, like when you're talking to somebody, it's like kind of a big deal, but like unless you're like fucking feeding me or financing me, it's none of your fucking business. And it's not like I really like want people down there anyway, so I just think that it's intrusive and it's rude as fuck, and you will get smacked. That's it. That's all that matters.
So, how I feel when, like, it comes to genitalia and stuff, like, how people, like, in my opinion, like, how it affects me is that, like, I think it's a very disrespectful question to ask someone who's trans, because it's like, because one, it's none of your business. Two, it's like, it's...
So, being a college student at Northeastern, I'm trying to go stealth right now. But recently, I've been telling a few of my classmates, and they don't know anything about transgender issues or, you know, what it means, at least not to a large extent. And so that's kind of like, they mostly ask me about my genitals and about like hormones and all those types of things. And it's crazy to see how males especially will treat me a certain way when they first think that I'm a man, and then when they find out that I'm trans, it's like I'm no longer a man. I'm a girl dressed up in boys' clothes, and all the like the closeness that we had is just gone, and that's probably the most frustrating thing for me. That's how I know how to answer that question.
Yeah, I definitely think society places too much like emphasis on like what is in someone's pants versus like how that person identifies. And I think that the way it affects me is that sometimes I feel like people don't really like see me as a man because like I don't have a penis, and I think that like it's more like someone's identity as a man, a woman, or however they identify is more complex than like the genitalia they were born with. And I think that people make an assumption that sex and gender are the same thing when they're really not, because sex is what you're assigned at birth and like what the doctor says when you are born, like it's a boy or it's a girl. But gender is something that people like pick up along the way. Your sex is determined, but gender is something that's completely different. And I feel like people mix the two together, and so that's why people are like, well, you're not a man because you have a vagina, or you're not a woman because you have a penis, or you're not genderqueer because genderqueer people don't exist and you can only be a man or a woman. So it's like, you know, people really do use too much emphasis on genitalia, and like it's annoying. It's really annoying.
On the question of genitalia and how society puts a lot of emphasis on what's between the legs of trans people, I think that's along the lines of society or people feeling entitled to ask you certain questions. What's between your legs being one of them, but also, dating comes up, and a lot of times people will wonder, well, how do you get intimate with your partner? How do you have sex? Which I think is right along with there, in there with the genitalia question, where it's not really your business. If I was cis, this would never come up. Ever. No one would ever ask me how I have sex with my partner. That would not come up. And I think that's one of those things that that people in general just feel entitled to ask you. Like, oh, you're trans, and so this is a common curiosity. Can you please answer my question? I'm curious. And that's a very intimate thing. I think people cross the boundary with that question, well, amongst others. And for me personally, I haven't transitioned. I don't know if this is a, question to people, but people don't always know, depending on how I present. I've been mistaken for a different type of or people don't always know how I was born, and that's when the question will come up. And it's been asked of me by a person who was cisgendered and straight, heteronormative. This person is a good person. She's an ally. She was trying to be respectful and just to understand. But the question, what she wanted to know was, what are you genetically, what were you assigned at birth? And the way it came out was basically what's between you. That's how it came out. And so I think it's important to keep in mind that people sometimes, it'll come off as insensitive. This is because people don't think about these things. They don't think about, they themselves have never been questioned about anything like this. They don't think about, oh, nobody would ask me this. It's important to, I think, cut some people a little bit of slack. But it comes up and it's uncomfortable. I can't say that it's not. And I want to put that out there too. Please be sensitive. Please be aware of how you phrase things. Think about what you're asking the person. Do you care what's between my legs? Is that the question? Are you trying to ask me, what were you assigned at birth? Think about your word choice, I guess, is what I want to, stress. Because it could be triggering. It could be, my source of dysphoria sometimes comes from what's between my legs personally. And so being asked straight up like that could trigger feelings in me where otherwise, I could say I was assigned female at birth. With less of a problem than, oh, well, this and that, is my anatomy. So, keep that in mind.
There is this obsession with genitalia. There's this obsession that, especially with surgeries and the fact that a certain genitalia makeup is what defines what your gender is. And so I know me and a lot of my other trans friends always get asked, like, well, are you going to get the bottom surgery? Or, or when you tell them that you're a man, or you tell them that you're a trans man, or you tell them that you're a trans woman, they're like, but did you get the surgery, though? And it's like, that first of all, it's none of your business. And second of all, that doesn't particularly matter because my gender is what it is. It's not conducive to, like, what's between my legs. And I always try to tell people that, but they just don't, some people just don't get it. It just does not click in their head that it's not about that. And then it also comes to a point that if you haven't got the surgery, you're being forced to aspire to get the surgery. And so every time I talk about top surgery, there's always someone who asks, like, so are you going to get the bottom surgery? And I'm like, first of all, it's none of your business, but sometimes I feel open enough to talk about it. I'm just like, that's not really on my radar right now. Maybe not. I don't know. And then there's always this question and look like, I guess if you're not going to get the surgery, it's like, but but you don't know me. You don't know my story. Like, I don't have to transition like everyone else does. Like, that's not what it's about. We're not robots that are going to be mass produced across the line and be trans soldiers or whatever. Like, we're all people. We all have different needs and different wants and different desires. So it shouldn't all be about whether or not we're going to get the bottom surgery, because there's a lot of other things that are going on in the world. Like, there's depression, there's suicide rates, there's murder, there's mass incarceration, there's just it's a lot of other things going on in the trans community than, you know, whether or not we're going to get our dick snipped or wherever they're going to get our clit elongated. Like, it's not all about that. Like, there's so many other things that are more important that we need to be talking about that we're not talking about. We're keeping it hidden. People are dying every day and haven't really heard about it. Like, Laverne Cox had to sell a story that I hadn't even heard about because the media is just all circling around whether or not Chaz Bono has got his bottom surgery yet, or whether or not Carmen Herrera, you know, is doing her thing down there. And it's like, but first of all, she's trying to fix her career in a way that doesn't have to focus on her genitalia. And now you're trying to emphasize it to a point that, first of all, makes her completely uncomfortable. And second of all, is trying to put her on blast for no reason, because, like, it shouldn't matter. Has a certain genitalia isn't going to affect, like, the fact that she's trying to be a model or that she is a model. Like, she's a model nonetheless. So just, like, get out of her face about it. And that's why I wish people would stop bothering us so much about our genitalia, because it's not as important as people make it out to be.
It because it's really personal what's down here, because that's been spoken about so many times, you know, like in other interviews with other trans people. They always focus on either the transition or the genitalia, and I feel like trans people, they're more to trans people than just that. After the transition, there's still life to live.
Right now, dating, well, being trans is not hard because I'm in a relationship. But, I don't know. It wasn't like extremely hard, but it gets annoying because half the time dudes are okay with your tea, especially if you, like, I feel like if you pass, like, Boston is a very much, I saw this on Facebook today. One of my homegirls posted this. Boston is a realness city. A lot of the girls here are real, and people only really know you're trans if they know that you're like, if you're like friends with trans girls. And a lot of the trans girls here aren't like, whoo, open about it. And I'm the type of person, like, when I'm first starting to talk to somebody, I don't necessarily come out and like say it. I like wait to see like how they're feeling, how they like feel on other certain topics like around it, or if they meet me on a dating website, I just assume that they know, and if they don't know, then like read. But it's real interesting because half the time, like, they're like, oh nah, not about that, and they're like, I can't date a man, and then we have the whole like, I'm not a man discussion, and like, I feel like I leave them with some knowledge, and then I'm like, okay, peace. And then some of them are like, can we just be friends? And like, then we become friends, and then I'm like just one of their homies, and I'm like, oh, okay, that, which is not like bad. I mean, you know, it's great having, you know, straight guy friends. I feel like if something ever happens to me, I can be like, dudes, fuck them up, because I'm not trying to fight anymore. And then there are the dudes who are okay with your tea, but then they like decide they can't handle dating you, and they're just like weak. And then they're the ones who fetishize you, and you're like, okay, you're also weak and you're disgusting. Like, please stop chasing me. Ugh. But like, I don't know. It's real hard to like find somebody who's like okay with it and like okay with you and will like date you and like not fetishize you. But lesbians are weird. Some of them, because like there's no set formula. I've talked to some girls who were like, that's like really hot, and some girls were like, as long as I don't have to touch your dick, like that's, we can. And then like some girls are just like, no, and you're just like, okay. And some, I don't know. I love trans men. I'm not gonna sit there and act like I don't. Shout out to Carter. He started it. It's his fault. But like, yeah, no, like trans guys are like, they're great because they're like guys, and like they're nice. Most of them. I have met a couple of trans guys who are like assholes, like not like cool assholes, but like them like mean assholes. Like, or like some of them are assholes, but they're like funny assholes. like the one sitting next to me. It's yeah, every once in a while you get lucky. I got lucky, so there.
Now, like Alyssa said, we're together, so dating currently is not difficult since I'm in a relationship. Otherwise, for me, there's no way to not come out. Because I'm not in any process of chemically or medically transitioning, I look like a female. I look like a woman. Men approach me, straight cis men. Now, I like trans women. So, I'll say something like, I don't date men, which unfortunately doesn't deter a lot of people, and so I either have to explain myself or get, kind of hostile. Of course, this is losers on the street, so. But putting myself out there in the dating sites, there's no way not to say what I am. If I'm on, and I'm always on queer things, Grindr being one of them, so my headline, it'll just say F to M, so people know. Doesn't mean that everybody knows what it means or reads or cares, but I have to put myself out there. People won't know who I am otherwise. So that's kind of a challenge because, it's a personal thing, and you sort of have to tell strangers. Obviously, on the queer sites, I'm more comfortable. People in the street, I'll just say something like, I don't date men. I don't just come out all over the place. But it's hard in the sense, too, that I feel like a lot of people, either they don't date trans people or it's a problem because of how I look. So they'll say something, okay, but you don't look like a dude, and so that's an issue. And I understand, like, you have a great personality, but it's not, it's not enough. So I feel like that might narrow the dating pool down even more. Not completely, but, so I feel like it can be hard in that respect. Not a lot of people will understand. I want my partner to be able to understand what I go through, and that's one of the reasons I think that I like trans women, because, it's a girl, it'll compliment my personality, but at the same time, it's important for me that my partner understands where I'm coming from, and so.
So when it came to dating, it always kind of freaked me out when I first came out as transgender. I had a girlfriend at the time, and she identified as a lesbian, and so when she figured out I was trans, she freaked out. I wasn't who she was going to be attracted to, and so that's what happened. Now I'm dating a trans girl, which is amazing because finally I have somebody that understands what I'm going through. And I know that's not so typical, but I'm very happy with what's going on there. But still, if I were to be single, I'd be worried about where am I supposed to go? Do I go to the gay club? Do I go to the straight club? Who do I hit on when I'm doing that? And I still kind of live in fear when it comes to talking to girls right now, just being like, am I even leading them on by not telling them I'm trans from the beginning? It's that kind of question. I don't feel like I should have to worry about that, but I know I'm always going to,
Dating while trans is definitely difficult. I think, firstly, where am I going to meet people? So it's like, if I see someone on the train or the bus, I can't go up to them and be like, hey, what's good? Because there needs to be another conversation that happens after that about me being trans, because I feel like if I'm going to be involved with someone romantically, that they should know that I'm trans. So I think firstly there's this where am I going to meet people thing. And then I think when I get with someone, it's how do they understand trans issues? Have they ever dated a trans person before? Oftentimes I'm the first trans guy that someone's dated, which makes things really difficult because I basically have to teach them how to date a trans guy when it's the same thing as dating a guy who's not trans, but they sometimes go off of what your body looks like, and this whole negotiation around, well, what do you call your body parts and things like that. So I think dating while trans is definitely difficult, and sometimes I'm just kind of I don't even want to deal with it, honestly.
Dating while trans, I can tell you many stories, is the most difficult physically and mentally thing that can ever happen to a transgender woman. Physically difficult due to the fact that anything can happen to you in a club or somebody walk up to you and ask you, da 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 da. And there's some transgender women that are very open about who they are. And anything can happen when they're very open. Me, for instance, I don't tell myself in public, tell people that I'm transgender. Yeah, I chat with them and go on about my business, and then I may text them or give them a call that afternoon or later, whenever I give them a call, and then I let them know then, because I'm not in the public, because a man has a big ego. You don't want to push any kind of buttons on them and let yourself be known, because he could have friends. You don't want to get hurt. So that's how I handle mine. You can handle yours how you want to do it, or wherever you want to do it, if that's to your liking. Me personally, I worry about my safety. I've had a lot of good friends hurt. I've had a lot of good friends disappear that I don't know where they are today.
Well, dating while trans, like, to me, I find it a little bit complicating, but at the same time, like, I don't know, I find it complicated because, like, my biggest fear is that, like, telling, like, because if you really like someone, and if they like you back, and it's like if you guys start talking, but, like, trying to, like, there'll be a time when you really have to tell them, like, who you really are and stuff. Because if it's, like, in a true relationship, that's when the deepest, darkest secrets come out. And my biggest fear about that is, I'm just afraid of getting hurt emotionally and physically. Because I have been hurt emotionally pretty bad before. And, well, obviously it wasn't fun.
Dating for me, I don't know. So, me personally, I don't date as much. I do actually go about the process of trying to find someone who I want to be with. I don't really do it, I guess. I think most of the relationships that I've been in has been someone who's approached me, because I'm very conscious about when I interact with people, what their reaction is going to be, especially in talking about being trans. And not so much that I fear going to other people, but I just don't. I don't know. Honestly, sometimes I just don't want to be bothered with the process, because it is complicated, and some people just don't understand it. So most of the time, I'll wonder, like, what it's like, but then I don't usually explore it too much, and that's because of this assumption that my body's supposed to be, or that even my demeanor is supposed to be a particular way, seeing how we live in. First of all, we live in a six sexist world, and then we also live in this heteronormative world. So when I'm trying to navigate throughout, like, this dating realm, it's like, so who's straight? Who's gonna be someone who will be affirming to my identity as a transgender man, or as a black man of trans experience, and also who is going to be affirming to my body type.
We have a super special, this is the second Break the Chains performance from Blackout. Give it up for Blackout!
I can't breathe.
He is a part of me now.
His badge glance in the street light.
His Irish skin does not scream savior,
but screams devil.
I have been hunted before.
Over and over and over.
I am still hunted.
Through every timeline. Every day I am killed by white men who steal my land. Every day I am stolen and forced to build this country while remaining enslaved. I can't breathe.
And yet I am still breathing.
The experiences of my ancestors are my own. Much like my grandparents and parents who marched for their rights, I am still marching, still beaten, still jailed.
I am still killed, all under the pretense of a post-racial America.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
But I know you're asking, breathe.
Cause your breathing down my neck.
God has made these crackers feel invincible.
So much that the people in the chokehold can hear me say,
I can't breathe.
loud as hell, girl, that ghetto girl, that do you speak Ebonics, girl, that you need to code switch, girl, that ghetto girl, that reverse racist girl, that sassiness level over 100 girl, that wears fake hair, girl, that nappy-headed girl, that wow, you're so smart, girl, that she thinks she's cute because she's light-skinned, girl, that articulate girl, that Afrocentric girl, that nigger girl. They call me trans girl, the word trans, said begrudgingly, because truth be told, they'd rather call me tranny. I am that trans girl, that always raging against the patriarchy girl, that changed his sex girl, that used to be a man girl, that slutty girl, that life expectancy is 35 girl, that hooker bitch girl, that you're pretty for someone who was born a man girl, that you look trans girl, that pretends girl, that girl. They call me girl, they call me nigger, they call me faggot, they call me man, but I am not what they call me. I am a woman, yes, I am a woman. I am black and trans and a woman. I am the definition of intersectionality, a being who exists in more than one realm, weaving in and out of identities, but all coming back to the reality, this reality, that I am black, that I am trans, that I am hunted, that I am a woman, but most importantly, that I am defined by me. I call me woman. The word woman finally fitting me and feeling right within my body and my soul. That fighting against racism, woman. That always searching for visibility, woman. That fighting for my brothers and my sisters, woman. That passionate about justice, woman. That activism through art, woman. That I refuse to back down, woman. That I'm black and I'm trans and I'm here, woman. That I just want to fucking live, woman. That woman, and that's what you'll call me.
If our action is putting our hands up begging, please don't shoot, and you fire, how you figure the problem lies with us and not you, Mr. Officer? I mean, you're the one with the gun, Mr. Officer, tearing apart mothers and sons, Mr. Officer, destroying families, leaving them with voids, Mr. Officer. You get paid to be stereotype influenced paranoid, Mr. Officer. Okay, Mr. Officer, okay, Mr. Officer. You say I should see it your way, Mr. Officer? Well, I'm black, queer, and conscious all day, Mr. Officer. So you fuck off over that way, Mr. Officer. Mr. Officer, this shit ain't no misunderstanding. Y'all cops take shots, knowing right where they'll be landed. Systematic wiping out of black and brown bodies at your will. Mr. Officer, you got a license to kill. I mean, you benefit from privilege, Mr. Officer. Able to kill black adults and kids, Mr. Officer. Now one of us is safe from your wrath, Mr. Officer. I pray I never cross your path, Mr. Officer. And when I do, I take a deep breath, Mr. Officer. Looking at you wrong can mean death, Mr. Officer. Because being black is a crime too, Mr. Officer. Your badge is to serve and protect you, Mr. Officer. Mr. Officer, this shit ain't no misunderstanding. Y'all cops won't stop, so we're not asking, we're demanding. To stop being demonized, murdered, and locked in a cage. Mr. Officer, you're about to learn the true definition of black rage. I mean, you should know we will not be denied, Mr. Officer. We will get justice for all those who have died, Mr. Officer. The marches and protests won't cease, Mr. Officer. We'll keep shouting, no justice, no peace, Mr. Officer. Speaking out against the dominant white powers, Mr. Officer. Putting in the seconds, minutes, and hours, Mr. Officer. No sleep until we get what is ours, Mr. Officer. Mr. Officer, listen close so you don't misunderstand. We won't be silent, we're defiant to overthrow the fucking man. Stand in the way of our victory if you dare. Mr. Officer, we are here, we're not leaving. Black fists in the air. Woo!
So in Maryland, they are actually fighting for a law. It's called the Fairness for All Marylanders Act. I did some work with it with the Maryland Coalition for Transgender Equality, and they're trying to fight for this bill it already went through the Senate, I believe. They're trying to get it through the Senate now, and that's supposed to provide protections in Maryland for trans and gender non-conforming people, so that no institution can discriminate against a person based off of gender identity or gender expression. Since in a lot of sectors in Maryland especially, in Maryland there are no protections for someone to discriminate against you in housing, in employment, and healthcare. And so there's a lot of trans people who are homeless, there's a lot of trans people who don't have health care, and there are a lot of trans people who don't have jobs, which is why our community is so poor, and why we're so sickly and going through a whole bunch of shit. And we don't have any backup or any support in the state of Maryland anyway. So when I think about employment, like right now I'm okay because I'm working on campus. My campus is very progressive in the movement to making it more inclusive to gender variant people. But in the actual state of Maryland, once I leave college, I am constantly thinking about where I'm going to be working. I'm only looking for queer-friendly spaces, which is very limiting. The pool is not as big as it should be. And I'm also thinking about the laws. I'm always having to research, what's their anti-discrimination law that they have in the office or at the institution that I want to work at. And also it's also about identity too, because working in certain communities that are populated by certain identity groups is also something that I'm always thinking about. Even though I'm a black person, I know that in the black community, being trans is not always a conversation that we're going to have. And when it is had, it's filled with a lot of negative stigma, a lot of negative connotations about trans people. So when working in a space like that, or thinking about working in a space like that, I somewhat stray away with it, even though I really do want to work with people of color. So it's hard to navigate throughout trying to find a job, and that is something I'm really worried about, is having to face that, because I've had job opportunities and job offerings, but I'm also, when I'm going through the interview process and I'm thinking about when I get an email that says, "Oh, we want to interview you," I'm thinking about, well, once they interview me, if they like me and they want to give me the job, what is the atmosphere going to be like? And then once am I in that atmosphere, how am I going to be perceived? Like, am I actually going to enjoy this work? And hopefully, seeing how I want to work in social justice, like, that community will be open to that. But I guess sometimes there's jobs in the transition that you need, because you're not going to always have a full-time job, or like a job that you'll have for the rest of your life. Like, that's not always the case. So I'm always thinking about jobs that I have in the interludes, and that are just like those jobs that I need for the summer, or just that job that I need for that season. For example, when I was last summer, I got a job opportunity to work at Wendy's, but I turned it down because I was like, well, the neighborhood in which the Wendy's is located, I've seen the people there, and I've seen how they act. So heard some of their comments, and it's just like, I don't want to be in that space. And then it's also because I hadn't had my documentation changed yet for my gender marker, like having to give them my social security number and having to interview me. I knew that there would be questions that would rise up, and I just didn't want to go through that process. So I just completely turned the job down, and I didn't get to have any money that summer. It's fears like that keep you from financially supporting yourself, and it messes with your psyche a little bit, because you're just like, you feel trapped. Like, sometimes you feel trapped, and during that time period, I felt trapped, like I couldn't do anything. So that is something that I worry about all the time, thinking about into my years that are coming up to graduation.
So we do have protections here in Massachusetts. So trans people are protected in the areas of employment, education, which includes higher ed, housing and credit and lending, and then the hate crime law was extended to include gender identity. But we don't have public accommodations, which means that if a trans person goes into a restaurant, they can be removed from the restaurant simply because they're trans. So a trans person could work at the restaurant and be protected by employment, but once they get off the clock, if they want to sit down and eat, their employer can actually remove them from the premises for being transgender. So, and the reason that happened was because we were trying for such a long time to get this bill passed, and people were like calling it the bathroom bill, and they were like, there are going to be men in the women's room, and we don't want that. And so they placed a lot of emphasis on like men being in the women's room when really women are in the women's room. But people were kind of like, if we don't take this part out, the bill's not going to get passed at all. So they took that part out of the bill and opted to get, all the other things we got and then try to push for the other part of the bill at a later time.
And encountering transphobia within the community is interesting because I'm not transitioning, and I think that's important. There was a support group that I went to once that when I explained my situation, or somebody asked, "Why are you here?" And I said, because I have dysphoria because I'm trans. They went around with reasons not to transition or reasons you're not, they ask people for reasons you're not taking the next step. I think the question of how trans somebody is does come up, and what I want to stress is that transitioning is something people have every right to do. Some people find very necessary, but that is your choice. Not being trans, that's not the choice. So I think it's sad that gets forgotten. I think it's sad that people police others and tell others how to live or try to, oh, but you do this or you do. I could wear makeup if I want to. I could wear whatever I want to. That doesn't change who I am. I feel like someone like me, more than anybody, would know that. But that gets forgotten. And I think that's sad. I hope that in the future, people will be more apt to come out, whether they're transitioning or not. At least, even if you're just going to cross-dress, that's all you're going to do. At least you'll be more comfortable. You'll have a whole bunch of support, as opposed to you'll live more closeted or more sheltered because you feel like you're not going to do a bunch of things, and so you have no right to come to these spaces and talk to these people. That's not true. I think that's something that I want to see changing. I want to see a real accepting culture. Everybody's different. Every single person's different. We can't do to each other what others do to us, whether it's focusing on genitals or on, sex-specific questions. We can't focus on how far along are you in your transition questions. That's not what makes us trans.
Specifically the trans community, I do think that there is a lot of transphobia. And it's really weird because I've seen this more with trans women, to be honest. Sorry, girls. I'm not trying to throw y'all under the bus, but I'm about to do it anyway. A lot of trans people are like the gender police. And I'm like, that to me is the weirdest thing that I've ever come across, because I don't understand how anybody who changes genders can be you can't socially and publicly, when you socially transition, you are you become other. So it doesn't make sense to within your own community make people who aren't either transitioning from just male to female or female to male and are bigender or agender, doesn't make sense to make them feel bad about themselves. And I also when people first start transitioning, I don't think it's beneficial to beat them down. To tell a girl that she's not woman enough, which I was told when I first started transitioning, because I didn't want to wear makeup, and I was I'm friends with a bunch of girls who are also flat-chested and they're cis and they don't wear bras, so I don't think I need one right now, or and things of that nature. Me told oh, you're not woman enough, you should be wearing makeup, or you should be wearing a bra, you should have and weave, and hearing things like that from girls within the community, it's it's real off-putting. It makes you not want to be around trans people. I do understand that a lot of trans people have issues with people who may cross-dress for fetish reasons and stuff, and I understand that, but there's a difference between that and somebody who's not able to be full-time all the time. I'm not gonna make somebody feel bad. If you truly and honestly believe you're a woman and you're not able to transition, I feel that's so hard, because I wasn't able to transition for 6 years. I mean I had mentally transitioned, and I had sort of started socially transitioning with people and telling my friends and stuff, but I couldn't. I was in a situation where I really could not medically and fully socially transition, but I was lucky enough that I had people who accepted me as a woman, and they weren't in the trans community, and some of them weren't even in the LGBT community. They were just accepting. And so to go from that to hear girls in the community tell me that I'm not woman enough, and I've seen it with other girls where they will beat down girls who are 14, 15, 16, and it's that defeats the purpose. If anything, we should have people's backs. I know people who are agender, I know people who are bigender, I know people who don't who like are identifying somewhere on the trans spectrum but don't know where they are and like have no labels, and that's fine. I think that it's not our job. It's not anybody's job, one, to be the gender police, but if you're trans, it's definitely not your job. I think it should be your job to lift people up. And like, we need to come together as a community and stop, because too many of us, especially younger ones, are slipping through the cracks. And I don't know, like, as a community, I don't think we should be letting that happen, and I don't think we can afford to let it happen. I also think that like older girls and younger girls need to just stop fighting. And I mean, like, I don't know much about how about the dynamics with trans men, but I do know that a lot of older transitioners get a lot of shit from younger transitioners, and vice versa. Like, the older girls will give younger girls shit, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what I did, but I don't deserve for you to sit there and like talk shit about me and say that I think I'm pretty, or like I think I'm too good to talk to people who like maybe don't pass as well as me and stuff, because I'm never gonna be that girl. And I think a lot of it is that girls get beat down and they become the same girls who beat them down, and so there's just like this cycle in the trans community of people like tearing each other apart and like trying to break down everybody, but in the end that gets us nowhere. And if you want to be like accepted, if we want to be accepted, we want to be like just as normal as the cisgender person who's sitting on the bus next to us, then like at some point we're gonna have to stop beating each other down.
I would love to believe, and I wish it was the case that, you know, there was only transphobia outside of the community, but unfortunately there's transphobia within the community too. And it's mostly it is centered around this idea of what makes a woman and what makes a man, and identities within the middle of the binary of female and male or woman and man is completely overshadowed, to the extent that you have trans men like bickering about how there are trans masculine people and who don't want to get the surgeries or don't want to take hormones or don't want to or who identify within the gay community and who are even like open about their identities. There's a lot of hatred or a lot of like animosity towards that. I think whatever identity you feel you are, that's who you are, and that's how it goes. But to hear some of the things that other trans people have to say about trans people is, to me, it's really just disgusting. I don't understand it because we're all going through something and we're all struggling with the identity of being trans and with like the animosity that comes from being just trans and the discrimination that comes from being trans. Even if you're stealth, you still deal with that because there's a lot of internalized transphobia that you have, and then you start to perpetuate that on other people, and that in itself is a struggle because you isolate yourself from other people who could be possibly supportive or could even understand like the struggle that you went through or the struggle that you're going through now. And so I just don't understand it. I just don't get it. I try to tell people all the time, like, you just gotta accept people for who they are, and you have to accept that everyone transitions differently, and that we're not all searching for the same thing. But it is very much apparent, and I think it just sucks because like our community, it gets broken up like that. And we need as many people who are fighting for our own rights as possible. And to know that it's broken up and that we have people within the community who are not really helping us move forward is saddening, it's angering, it's destructive, it's not good, it's not conducive to our progress. I wish that we would come together, be affirming of everyone's identity, stealth or not. Like, I definitely don't believe in every stealth trans man or every stealth trans woman coming out and being like, hey, I'm trans, whatever, because, not everyone has that safety to do that. People have jobs. We do not have protections everywhere. People have jobs where they cannot come out, and that's perfectly fine, but just don't go around acting like that wasn't you at some point, or that you haven't been in that place before. I think there's transphobia and there's also like just sexism in general, and you have like trans men who like bash women as if they weren't being seen as women at some point and didn't have to face that same type of sexism. Like, just, I don't understand. Like, how can you just flip the switch like that? Just because you're a man doesn't mean you have to act like a stereotypical dude. Like, you just don't have to do that. Like, you can still be respectful. And the same thing for trans women. Like, you don't have to do that. And so we just need to come together, and we need to be more respectful of people's differences and understand that there is a commonality between all of us. Like, we can be different, but we're also the same too, and there's a balance between that. And if people just acknowledge that more and was respectful of everyone's stories, then it would be a much better knit community instead of all this sassy, catty bullshit.
So I think that, like, when I first encountered transphobia within the trans community, I was like baffled, because I was just like, I don't actually understand how this is even possible. But the more I encountered it, I started to understand what it stems from. And I think it's because trans people want for cis people to understand them. And when someone steps outside of what is considered normal within being a trans person, other trans people get afraid that, like, their identities are going to be invalidated and people won't take them seriously. I think that comes up a lot with gender queer folks. So I've heard other trans people say, like, gender queer people don't exist, and, like, you're either a man or a woman. And it's, like, mind-blowing to hear that from a trans person. It's like, are you serious? Like, are you kidding me? Like, what are you talking about? I also think that it can come from like trans women or trans men directed at other trans women, other trans men, you know, about how they want to go about their transition, like whether or not they want to take hormones, whether or not they want to get surgery. And it's like, you know, if you don't want these things, then you're not really a man. Well, guess what? That's not true. Like, I don't want bottom surgery. I'm still a man. Like, I don't have to get bottom surgery because I say I'm a man, so that means I'm a man. And what that looks like for me is completely different than what it looks like for someone else. I really feel like some trans people need to really sit down and think about why they feel the way they do about certain things. Like, why are you so worried about what someone else is doing? Because it's the same thing with cis people saying, well, why didn't you just stay the sex that you were born? Like, why are you even transitioning? It's like, I mean, I think people really just need to mind their business.
For my future, I really just want to be successful in whatever I do, and not be like judged because I'm trans, but rather like just be like, oh, she's trans, but like she's great at what she does, and it doesn't really matter. I definitely want to like write and act and continue being an activist, and so I hope to like, continue my acting career and like stop at a certain point so I can have, kids and be a housewife and all that good stuff, and like write books, and I guess, do like speaking engagements and stuff if people will have me. I mean, I've done that, and I do really like being able to like talk about being trans and like inspiring people, so that's nice. And like I said, I want to be a housewife, I want to get married, have kids, and then have a nice little house, 6-bedroom house with an indoor and outdoor pool, not a white picket fence, I want a goddamn gate. And for the community, I just want us to be accepted in society. I want to see trans people on TV playing not only trans people, but like cis people. I want to see, like, I don't want it to be a big deal. I don't want it to always be like this big deal where like people are afraid to come out. People are afraid that after they come out, like, they won't be accepted, or that they'll be kicked out, or that they won't be able to get into the job. They won't be able to get the job they want, or they won't be accepted to the college that they want because they're trans. I want us to literally just be another blip, like another blip on the radar. I just want us to be normal, to fit in, to be like everybody else. And I really hope that we can come together and make it happen. I mean, it's going to take a lot of work, but I think it could happen. I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime. I think I'll be fighting to the day I die. Because, I mean, before we can accept trans people, we have to end racism, and that's a whole other thing in of itself. But, I would like that to happen. I would like us to be accepted. I would like to see my brothers and sisters to stop being murdered because they're trans. I'd like it to get to a point where, like, it doesn't matter if you're trans or cis. You're just another person.
So what I want for my future is to, like I said before, like have top surgery. And then in terms of like professionally, I want to continue working in like the nonprofit social justice world and get my bachelor's in human services and maybe eventually like own my own nonprofit organization that specifically works with trans people. In terms of the trans community as a whole, I just want trans people to like be treated equally as other people and to have the rights and access to care and employment, all of the other things like everyone else. Especially in terms of like surgeries and stuff, because surgeries are like really expensive and a lot of trans people spend their whole lives wanting surgery and they aren't able to afford it. So I feel like states need to step up and like include sexual reassignment surgeries in their policies within the health insurance. And I also want for people within the trans community to stop policing each other, because I feel like it reinforces what the people outside of the trans community are doing when we do it to each other.
Ultimately, my hope is that we are going to be, trans people are going to be able to be seen as the people that they are and not the gender that they are, the gender that they're transitioning to, or that whole process. So that's my hope. And for me, one of my biggest struggles is I do know a few people that have decided to transition and then completely leave behind the rest of the trans community. And I understand where they're coming from, but at the same time it's frustrating for me, and I hope that when I reach the point that they are, I don't choose to do the same thing. And is it going stealth or not, and then do you forget about the people that are going through the things you used to go to? Do you just leave them behind, or do you fight for them? And I hope that, people, you can choose to live your own life when it comes to your life, but always remember to come back and help out the younger ones or the people that are going through all the struggles that you went through. So I just hope that we stick together and any of the fighting that's going on within our community can kind of go away. I don't know how it's going to be with the rest of society, but I hope one day we're all just people.
So in moving forward, I would really just like to see, I see my future as a trans person, like in this very cis, sexist, and heteronormative society is to have more acceptance and have more understanding and more visibility in multiple realms and spaces, because I know right now, like, and more diverse visibility too. Obviously there is the stereotypical trans people that do exist, but to have more conversations and more positive imagery about people who aren't the stereotypical binary, people who are in the middle, trans people of color, successful trans people, not the depressed trans people that always are shown, not the trans people who are always aspiring to get all the surgeries, not the super macho trans man and the super feminine trans woman, and like I would like there to be more variety and more diversity in the conversation and also in the presentation of trans people as we move along and as we change and progress throughout society. And I hope that throughout that process of gaining more stories and gaining more visibility and gaining more positive presentations, that we do so in a way that is united instead of a way that's divided. I would love there to be an opportunity for everyone to feel like they can be open about their identity. Not that they have to, but I just want that to be, I wish there was, as we move forward, I hope that those spaces, more spaces like that are provided where people can feel like they can be open if they so choose to be. If they still choose to be stealth, then sure, that's great, or that's fine for them. But I just need there to be more spaces like that, so that when people want to be open, they can be open, and that we provide those spaces for each other, instead of all this catty back and forth. What makes a trans woman, what makes a trans man, what makes a man, what makes a woman. It's just like what makes us us, and like how we standing in our truth and being and loving ourselves, that we are able to spread that truth to other people and spread that love to other people and make our community more welcoming and more open, so that we don't have to, so we don't even have to be that trans guy or that trans girl or that trans man or that trans woman. We can just be us, and we can just be be ourselves, be human, and be a part of this universe as we are, and not have to always put labels on everything.
but have those spaces if we so choose to have those labels and let them be empowering instead of having to sneak behind the scenes and stuff like that. So I think that's the biggest thing that I would want for our community, is to be true, to be loving, and to be us in a way that is affirming, in a way that is universal for everybody, no matter how you identify, no matter who you are, no matter what you choose to do with your life. Just like, so we can all just be cool.
All my life I've been trying to break out of this skin. You see, it's like an old overcoat, and somehow I'm trapped within. My father's hand was mighty, and strike swiftly did his blows. With every lesson came a riddle. One's mightier than his blow.